Welcome back to Belleville East Barstool Season 2. This is our second year doing this. We have a very special guest today, Mr. Craig Anderson, the director of the IHSA. Mr. Anderson, could you give us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? Did you play any sports in high school? Just give us a little background.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm Craig Anderson. I'm from Central Illinois, generally taught and coached out of college at Morton High School, and then went to Olympia High School for a few years where I became athletic director, and then I was athletic director at Washington High School for 5 years before coming to the association to work approximately 10 years ago. 5.5 years as assistant director, and then the last 4.5 years as the executive director. Was very involved in my high school, a rather small school of around 250 students. And so I was involved in 3 sports: football, basketball, and track and field, and was also part of band and chorus, and so part of the fine arts in addition to sports. So yeah, I know the experience, the positive experience that come from high school sports participation.
Mr. Anderson, I have a question. Do you want to go?
I have a question about, it's not really sports related, but what was your go-to lunch meal in high school?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I always ate hot lunch, and so high school was a long time ago for me. My go-to probably would have been mashed potatoes and turkey gravy was a special one. So yeah.
That's good.
That's perfect. Sounds like a great lunch.
Yeah.
So, Will, do you want to kick it off with question number 1?
I'll let you have that one, Andrew.
All right, so let's go here. So, Mr. Anderson, I was wondering, has the IHSA ever given full decision making over to the state government when it comes to this pandemic?
So early on, it was recommended by our board as we were looking at return to play activities way back in the summer and trying to resume our contact days in the summer, that our board directed us, upon them approving some guidance, that we get approval from the Department of Public Health and the governor's office. So from that day forward, we have generally used the governor's guidance, obviously coming from the Department of Public Health, to move us forward and transition into the fall, where we've been limited in the sport offerings. While we've offered individual sports, we've been unable to get our team sports because of the risk level that the governor has identified those, and that we can't participate yet. So our model has been similar to the states around us, where they've used state health departments and governor's office to provide guidance. And so, yeah, it just kind of, as we're, again, unprecedented situation in dealing with the pandemic, it just kind of made sense to make use of the medical experts, as they were working closely with the epidemiologists and the medical professionals, to let us get back into whatever level of participation we would have through their guidance.
That's definitely a big decision. Definitely a lot of decisions that go into this. But you said we're using the local surrounding states models, and Pritzker, obviously, he did a great job in controlling the virus. And we were wondering, why can't we play if the states around us they have a higher positivity rate, but they're playing, but we have the lowest one and we're not?
Yeah, so that's a similar question to what I have raised very recently with the governor's office. And the input they provide back is that they somehow believe that we've been able to maintain the low positivity rate in comparison to other states, because we haven't competed in a number of our team sports and haven't created spread of the virus that way. While I don't agree with that position necessarily, because I think in other states, as they began practice and then transition into competition, that wherever their positivity rate was at within their state, that's generally been maintained as they've initiated. So the states that are going aren't seeing increases as a result of activity. They've generally fallen equal to where they've been. So it's a difficult argument because you're right. As a state, I think collectively we've done a great job of keeping the positivity rate down. And but at the same time, I believe that if we had permission, we do and have plans for our schools to initiate the fall sports and then eventually our winter sports with some appropriate guidance and all the restrictions we think would be necessary to maintain safety of players in their competition. And I would love the opportunity to do that, but obviously we need the support of the governor's office and the Department of Public Health to do that.
Mr. Anderson, I was wondering what can we do as students and as student athletes to help make this decision easier for you and help ourselves out by giving us the opportunity to play our sports?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I know, and you guys probably are aware of the Let Us Play rallies that are coming up. I don't know what the impact of that is going to be, but I think that definitely is one way to show with support of schools and coaches and obviously teammates of different schools getting together to rally. Definitely would, I think, show some recognition of the strong support that exists across the state of wanting to resume activities, especially the team sports that we're unable to participate now, and for sure transitioning into the basketball season very soon. So, beyond that, it puts all of us in a challenging position. I understand the students are the ones who are suffering, and it's a message that I've tried to carry in my conversations. While they're limited with the governor's office when I can, I definitely make sure it's known where I believe the best interest of students would be to have them re-engaged with their teammates, with their coaches in practice and competition. So, other than engaging, local representatives and, parents supporting that, I'm talking about state representatives, state senators, to have them, voice similar concerns with the governor's office could be one way to initiate some further discussion on those that could hopefully make a difference.
Do you think those will have a positive impact?
I'm sorry, Will?
Do you think those the Let Us Play rallies being held, do you think those will have a positive impact?
Oh, I think they will. Yeah, I think as long as the students and all of those in attendance do so respectfully and safely, I think it will have a positive effect because I think the numbers will show that there's a clear interest of people wanting to be re-engaged in sports. And I think that's a positive. So as long as it's done and conducted the right way, I think it will be a positive outcome. And who's to say how much quicker we might resume? But honestly, I think the recent discussion that we've heard in the governor's press conference this week is much a result of his knowledge of these some previous rallies, along with these two, what I think are going to be really big student rallies that are happening this weekend. So to me, it's for one of the first times had the governor really address it in a press conference. And so keeping the conversation open, I think can only help us return quicker.
Mr. Anderson, so me and Will both acknowledged when we were discussing and thinking of questions to ask during this interview, we both acknowledged that you can, receive the coronavirus from, anything you do, whether that be going out to go to the grocery store or just going to the gym. Now, why do you think that that being outside and playing sports is something that we should shut down and shut off when we have all these restrictions with contact tracing and all these health restrictions and stuff like that? I feel like it would be a positive for students to get outside and get away from all of this negative of the pandemic. And so what do you think about all that?
Yeah, so I generally agree with both of you in that position. And again, my conversations with the governor's office when I do get that opportunity are really to share that same opinion, that I think school sports in particular are where students should be participating, not in clubs, not in non-school activities, but with their schools, because there's a structure within schools of supervision and guidance from coaches that are trained to serve as coaches, and with the proper guidance. And we have, and as a part of our association, physicians that serve us as in what we call our Sports Medicine Advisory Committee, that would help us prepare the guidance to have our schools and students, coaches conduct it safely. So I've championed for a while, it feels like, and I will continue to do so, the health and mental and health well-being of our students could be much benefited from an opportunity for students to re-engage with their sport teams, because the freedom at which that students may have now after school to go do things they maybe shouldn't be doing, but if they had practice responsibilities or competitions, that's a better spot for them to be engaged in, to benefit from participating on the team and all the lifelong lessons that are learned from that. So I agree with you 100%. And again, it's something I champion in my role, and in addition, in my role as a parent. So I have a son, I believe, a junior. I think you guys are both juniors, is that right?
I'm a senior. Will's a junior.
Senior? Okay, yeah, Will. Okay, I thought one of you was a junior. So, that's my youngest son, who's a 3-sport athlete, and so I see it as a parent as well. So I do recognize the benefits and recognize in the pandemic that there are risks, and as long as the families are comfortable with students taking that risk, then let's give them the opportunity.
So obviously the NFL just started back up and the Big Ten can just now play. So why aren't we able to play if those guys can play?
Yeah, you're bringing up good questions that I don't have the answers to, much like why are the states around us playing and we're not able to. It really pushes back on the fact that according to the governor, his medical experts and epidemiologists he speaks to are suggesting that we shouldn't. And so it really, and I hate to keep pointing it back to there, but that's really where it's at. That's what is holding us up, that our governor's office and those that are directing him, at least at this point, are recommending that we not resume until a lesser positivity rate or, maybe a vaccine. I don't know, because I haven't been told what we're trying to transition to completely before we could restart. So, I'm seeing the same things you are and wondering exactly the same thing.
Does
Do you play
Governor
fantasy football?
Well, I'm gonna go forward with this. So does Governor Pritzker have any evidence of team sports causing a rise in coronavirus numbers?
I've heard him referenced in press conference some, in my opinion, very unique situations that he references where a particular sports team, at one time I heard him reference the St. Louis Cardinals, another time a junior community college team, and then a high school team or school, Lake Zurich, in what happened in early July there, of which in all of those circumstances, as in my understanding, while there was a broad infection maybe of a particular group, it wasn't a result of their activities within sport-related competition. It was what those students may have collectively did outside of practice, competition, and that's what created the spread. It was a social event away from sport or activity where they were doing things probably without a face covering or being not taking appropriate safety precautions, and that's what's created the spread. So those are the small items. I've met recently with the state association executive directors that surround us that are going, moving forward with the team sports, well, all their fall sports. And to a person, none of them have indicated they've found a spread within a team as a result of activities, practice activities, competition activities, traveling with the team. That hasn't been why, if in very small number of cases, schools have maybe been shut down because of a positive case. It's something that's happening away from practice and away from competition.
We had a similar thing happen. We during summer workouts, we had a kid test positive, and we got shut down for a couple of days. There's no spread or anything. Just shut it down. We're right back up to it.
Yeah, and generally as we deal with this, to me there's no harm in that. We can expect that to come. I don't think it's going to be widespread, but again, when a positive test occurs, you take the appropriate steps. Health departments will help our schools and our students through that. And then as people become healthy or they come off of their quarantine, then we resume activity. We navigate that on a case-by-case basis. And I think that's going to become the new norm. And again, we can navigate that. I believe we can. I think our schools are prepared for that by now. We know so much more now than we did in the early spring when the pandemic was really coming upon us. So I think it's something that we can deal with.
Mr. Anderson, my next question was about how sports are classified as low, medium, or high risk, like with basketball being considered a medium risk sport, even though that's a close contact sport, just like football, which is considered a high risk sport. I'm curious as to how those were classified.
Yeah, good question. Really had nothing to do with our association, as those definitions were developed by within the all sports policy, which is part of the Illinois State Board of Education and the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. And ultimately, when I asked that question of the governor's office, I was told that the doctors that were a part of the Illinois Department of Public Health are the ones that actually made those associations where sports would fall and in what level. It wasn't us. So I have no idea who was involved in the discussion because nobody really asked us about our thoughts related to any of those assignments. But to answer your question, it came through doctors at the Department of Public Health that designated all those sports by level.
How much are you guys involved in the decision making now? I know I've heard you talk about the governor's office multiple times. So how much decisions are you guys actually making regarding youth sports?
So within the things that we're doing now, cross country, golf, the things we're permitted to do, so girls swimming, girls tennis that are actively ongoing, we're making decisions within the guidance we're offered related to how we're going to conduct regionals or sectionals in those sports. So when it comes to, things that our schools are currently conducting, we're using the guidance we're being offered, and then we're, working through that to create our guidance in those sports, and then obviously prepare for the tournaments that are coming at the end of the season. As it relates to future sports or future opportunities in the medium and high risk sports, there really isn't much we can or are able to do with those until we've been released some opportunities from the governor's office. So depending upon, what level and what area you're talking about, where we can and we have moved forward, our sports medicine advisory committee is actually preparing now and reviewing some guidance for our schools. If we can, when we can return to some competition in sports like basketball, wrestling, eventually we hope football, volleyball, soccer. So that is being prepared, but there's really no sense in putting it out there until we know that we can, in fact, move forward with some competition. So those are the kind of things we're working on, but we're working on it right now within the guidance that we currently anticipate in place when we resume.
I have a question about the recent decision to make students choose in school sports. So I'm going to be one of those athletes affected. And for volleyball, all the schools are out in California, and there's really none in the Midwest. So I'm going to be forced to choose club for college exposure, and there's thousands of kids just like me. They're going to have to do the same thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Will, you broke up at the very beginning of that. Can you start? I missed the first part of that.
Yeah. So with a recent decision to make students choose club or school sports, I'm one of those kids, and I'm going to have to choose club for the college exposure because no school from California that's recruiting me is going to come to, Southern Illinois for one conference game and head back home. They're going to be at these tournaments, and there's thousands of other kids, and all my friends are pretty much in the same boat. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and our board is still navigating that as they review the different options and the different opinions of our schools. So they're listening to our school administrators, listening to coaches, and trying to get their perspective, and also listening to our sports medicine advisory committee. So right now, it's tabled again. The decision that would permit, I think, what you're suggesting, an overlap of school and non-school activity in the same sport in the same season has been tabled. A decision to come later, but it's a difficult piece to navigate when we're talking about different sports, and we got some sports because of I'll speak of baseball as an example with pitch counts that we have to be kind of cautious about the safety of students. Potentially, having a pitch limit that's within their high school week of play, but that may or may not carry over to what they do on their non-school team. And, practicing and playing for a high school and club team could bring a student's participation level, if they're trying to practice nightly with both teams, and then on top of that, play contests during the week. And I assume weekend kind of tournaments on the club side. We're talking about students getting significant amounts of play, and overuse injuries are things that we're concerned about. So, but the exposure thing, I'm hearing a lot from parents and concerns about the inability for students to be out and get seen. So all those things are things we continue to navigate, and our board will, and I think we'll make the best decision for student safety and for the best interest of students that they can under the circumstances.
Mr. Anderson, I have a follow-up question to that. How do you feel about some high school students in Illinois, especially in our Metro East area, that are transferring schools and leaving Illinois to go over to bordering states like Missouri to play basketball and to play football because they know for a fact that they're going to get their seasons in? How do you feel about those type of situations and the people that are being put in those situations?
Yeah, that it's a challenging thing to navigate. I get it. I understand where I guess families have a means to do that, or have a second home that they move to a different state and take advantage of opportunities. So it's a bit disappointing, but I guess where they can do it, I wish they wouldn't. But I know that the pandemic has created things that we would have never anticipated. Leading my time in this position, would have never anticipated that we would go a fall season without playing football. I mean, I just could have never imagined that something would have shut down our season like this pandemic has. So we're dealing with incredibly challenging times, and I get it that parents are doing, and families are doing incredibly creative things, or things that I don't know that they would have anticipated doing necessarily. But when they return, and if they hope to return and play, the transfer determinations are going to be scrutinized very carefully to make sure they're meeting the requirements of our transfer bylaws to have eligibility when they return. And that was the board's recommendation. As I review those, I review and make decisions about the transfers into returning, where, you know, they may or may not be eligible upon their return. So it's because of, you know, we're dealing with the pandemic that these situations have occurred. I don't like the fact that we're not playing football, volleyball, and boys soccer right now, but you know, it's very much uncharted waters.
I have to ask a question, Mr. Anderson. So, are your favorite professional sports teams all in Chicago?
Yeah, I would say two of my favorite sports teams are in Chicago, being the Bears and the Cubs. Yeah, and I guess if I haven't followed hockey too much, but if I had to pick a favorite hockey team, I guess it would be the Blackhawks, though I don't follow hockey much. But yeah, you picked them right. Yep.
What do you think about Mitch Trubisky?
Well, he led us to a great come from behind win last week, and so hopefully that trends up for him and his future. He's a young quarterback, and but's got a great skill set. So hopefully, you know, with the help and support around him, he can lead the Bears to a successful season.
Do you play fantasy football, and is he your quarterback on your team if you play it?
I do play fantasy football, and he is not a quarterback on my team. And in fact, I think I just checked, he went undrafted and remains a free agent in our fantasy team. So if I think he's got a good matchup in the future, I may go pick him up.
Who are you rocking with your week 2 starting quarterback in your fantasy league?
Well, last week it was Garoppolo, and this week I'm debating about Garoppolo again or Jared Goff. Again, got to look at the matchups and see what happens.
Yes, sir. Now, Mr. Anderson, I think our final question for you today is going to be, if you could have full executive authority over everything, if this decision was purely yours, would we be playing football right now?
Oh, I think we would. Yeah. If I had the reins to determine what we would be doing. Yeah. You know, much like we're seeing happening around us, we would be playing football. I think I would want to make sure that I leaned on our sports medicine advisory committee to have the appropriate guidance for us to do it safely. But yeah, I'd love to be back playing football. My son, I mentioned, is a 3-sport athlete. He'd love to be playing football, and I love to be watching him play football right now. So yeah, if I had controls, we'd be playing football.
Well, Mr. Anderson, you know, we cannot thank you enough for taking a half an hour out of your day to answer some questions that we have as student athletes and as students. And this is going to answer a lot of questions for many people in the same boat as us. And we can't thank you enough. We really appreciate the experience and appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, guys. These questions were really good. You asked me a few that I don't ordinarily get dealing with the media, so those were a pleasant surprise. But you put together some really solid questions, and so I appreciate that. And much like you, you know, I hope that we're returning to playing fields, courts, as quickly as we can, as soon as we can. And so, yeah, I appreciate you taking the time and hopefully this will be well received, and know that from our office here in Bloomington, across the state, we support our young people, and we want to help them move forward and again, get back to those playing arenas and see the love that comes out of working closely with teammates. And so I welcome that day when we're back and full playing, and when we can have our spectators there to watch too. That'll be a blessing.
Okay, thank you again so much, Mr. Anderson. And that'll be it for this week's episode, and we'll see you guys again next week.